person who prosecuted Cohen? Jeff Berman, the man Barr fired last week. It's not just a pattern that's emerging here. It's an assault on our nation's judicial system and our justice system. But according to Barr, in an interview on Thursday, it's all just business as usual.
How do you answer a voter who sees a pattern here of continually upholding the personal interests of the president?
Well, I'd say that there is no such pattern.
Oh, well, that clears that up. Thanks a lot, Mr. Barr. Joining me now is Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania, and she is a Democratic member of the Judiciary and Financial Services Committees. Former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, Paul Butler, MSNBC legal analyst and a former federal prosecutor, and former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade. Thank you all for being here. And I'm going to go to you first, Congresswoman. What do you make of William Barr's very succinct defense of his behavior?
Well, it just doesn't hold any water. We've seen from the moment he auditioned for the position of Attorney General that he was auditioning for the president. And sadly, in every action he has taken, he has used his office and the mighty power of the Attorney General to be a political arm, a fixer, if you will, for the president. I had the privilege of being in both the hearings with Mr. Zelensky, Mr. Ayers, Mr. Elias with Judiciary, but then also, interestingly, SEC Chairman Clayton in front of Financial Services. What you see is Attorney General Barr not acting independently, not acting as an attorney. He misrepresents before the American people chronically on behalf of the president and then tries to instill fear in others who won't do so.
I mean, I guess the question then is, what can the public do about it? Here's just a list of what Barr has done that we know of. Misleading the preview of the Mueller report. Remember, he put out that fake version of it that made it sound like it exonerated Trump. Lower sentencing recommendations for Stone. Moved to drop the prosecution of Michael Flynn. Said that the Obama administration spied on the Trump campaign, which is a lie, and tried to remove Prosecutor Berman. And I wonder, Congresswoman, if you feel that it is, at this point, still possible to impeach him, because that is a sanction that is available to Congress under law. And I mean impeach Barr.
In my mind, and I understand that, in plain sight, Attorney General Barr has done over and over impeachable acts. In terms of process and whether we will go there, I don't know. But he is scheduled to come before us July the 28th. Recognize this is the first Attorney General not to come before Congress, chronically not to come before Congress. I want to add to that terrible list that you just showed, which debuted with his 4-page misrepresentation of the Mueller report, which he allowed to stand out there for 1 month, saying no collusion, no obstruction, none of that was true. That misrepresentation teed us off to the misrepresentation he would go through. Powerfully now and dangerously now is what he is doing to undermine our upcoming election with voter suppression, with tear gassing peaceful protesters. Think of what he's doing in terms of saying undermining the confidence of our elections, for example, with mail-in ballots, which, by the way, the president took advantage of in the primary election. He's signaling special treatment. When you say we'll make sure we get charges dismissed against you, Michael Flynn, when the very thing that was being investigated and he pled guilty to had to do with the interference in our elections in 2016. He is a master of disinformation. And I want to say, as an attorney, I practice as an attorney. I'm a recovering attorney now. The thing you are taught is that you are a servant of the court. You're not the servant of the president. And a misrepresentation before the court, which in this case is the court of public opinion, is something you must immediately correct. In word after deed, this Attorney General misrepresents facts and the law before the American people on behalf of a president. He's a simple fixer. He has no credibility. He needs to go.
Yeah. I think that there's quite a bit of agreement on that. And to the point that you just made, Congresswoman, 4 ways William Barr, the Washington Post, writes, is already subverting the 2020 elections. Safeguarding the vote would be the top priority. And for a normal attorney general, it's the opposite now. He's already looking for ways to undermine the election in order to keep the man he clearly considers to be king in place. Let's go to Barbara. Barbara, you and Joyce co-wrote a piece that was in New York Magazine on Thursday talking about the ways in which Barr is eroding the rule of law, saying don't let him get away with it. Don't let him get away with it implies there's something the public can do to stop him. What can be done to stop him other than getting rid of Donald Trump?
Well, I think the Senate has demonstrated their reluctance to impeach William Barr, even if the House, or to remove him, even if the House were to impeach him. But I think it is the court of public opinion, as the Congresswoman said, which could create sufficient pressure to cause William Barr to resign. We saw this in 2007. You may recall the Attorney General then was Alberto Gonzales. And it became disclosed that he was behind an effort to remove U.S. attorneys for political reasons if they weren't sufficiently, quote, loyal Bushies. And they were also hiring people at the Department of Justice based on their responses to questions about their political activity and affiliations and beliefs. Once that became known publicly, there was public pressure that drove him out of office. What William Barr has done is so much worse than that episode. But I think we need to continue to push this narrative, this accurate telling of all of the things that William Barr has done in an effort to create sufficient public pressure to force him to resign.
And let's play one more piece of another clip of Mr. Zelensky, who, again, is a prosecutor currently in the Maryland U.S. Attorney's Office. And this was his testimony on Wednesday.
That the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia was receiving heavy pressure from the highest levels of the Department of Justice, and that his instructions to us were based on political considerations. And I was told that the acting U.S. Attorney was giving Stone a break because he was afraid of the President of the United States.
Joyce, I think to a lot of people, this activity sounds a lot like Nixon's second attorney general, who ended up going to jail. It's hard to believe that what Barr is doing is legal. Could he face criminal sanctions for obstruction of justice, interfering in cases? Could that happen to him after Donald Trump is gone?
So I think Congresswoman Dean hits the nail on the head when she says Barr is acting like the president's fixer. There's certainly more than enough information in the public domain for Congress to investigate and engage in oversight. And we don't know what kind of evidence, frankly, that might turn up, Joy. So I don't think we can take anything off the table. I don't think right now there's something out there that just cries out for prosecution. But there's certainly a lot of smoke. And I'm old enough to remember a time when Eric Holder, in an interview, was asked whether he would continue on as Barack Obama's attorney general, and he just sort of quipped off the cuff that he was still the president's wingman. And he took a lot of criticism for that comment. He continues to be criticized for that comment. Bill Barr has gone so far beyond jokingly aligning himself with the president. He has done nothing but act as the president's fixer at every step along the way, to the detriment of the American people. There has to be accountability for that, whether it comes in a political forum or some other forum.
Yeah, let's play another piece of testimony. Now, this was Mr. Ayer attempting to testify. And Louis Gohmert of Texas, this is the collusion to the corruption, because the Republican Party is backing this to the hilt. Let's play that. This is Mr. Ayer trying to testify.
Barr's own role in the events in Lafayette Park come quickly to mind. So does his practice of regularly shrouding himself in the rhetoric and trappings of the rule of law, even as he desecrates and undermines the institutions that make it possible.
Paul, if the party of the president is colluding essentially with the corrupt behavior of the attorney general, it leaves the public very little recourse. And I think that is what is so frustrating and enraging about what Barr is doing. It appears that he is getting away with it.
He's getting away with making democracy extremely vulnerable. At first, the problem was only that Barr wasn't acting like he represented the United States, but rather he was Trump's fixer and personal defense attorney. But now, Joy, things have gone from bad to worse because Barr is actively undermining the interests of the United States. He's working against the interests of our democracy. Remember, the Mueller report was about influence of Russia in our election, about how Russia tried to steal the election. Barr is covering up and protecting everyone who was implicated in that investigation. Again, he's not working for the United States. He's working against the interest of our country.
Let's play a little bit of a reminder, because, you know, there were a lot of people who understood what Barr was probably going to be. I mean, he was called the cover-up general, backed by William Safire, not a liberal, a conservative commentator back in the late 80s. When he came in, he had a back and forth with Senator Kamala Harris, and this is May of 2019. I just want you guys to refresh your memory by listening to this.
Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
The president or anybody else?
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
They have not asked me to open an investigation, but
Perhaps they've suggested?
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
Hinted?
I don't know.
Inferred? You don't know. Okay.
A battle of synonyms. Congresswoman, did he lie to Congress in your view?
Sure. He couldn't be forthright. That's why he stumbled over his words. And I thought the senator did a fine job of revealing exactly who he is. Let's remember, this is also the attorney general who participated in the removal of 5 inspectors general, folks who were looking into or holding this administration accountable. Simple oversight that is a part of the co-equal branches of government. You know, Attorney General Barr is really a reflection of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is a reflection of crassness and cruelty, disrespect. You played that clip with Representative Gohmert tapping the table. The crassness, the disrespect that we see on the other side of the aisle as they carry the water of a president who is unworthy of that. We have a president who is undermining the rule of law, is breaking the law daily with the aid and abetting of an attorney general and those he's put around him. And think of the time that he's doing this. The attorney general with the president is trying to tear down the ACA. We're in the midst of a COVID pandemic. 125,000 people have lost their lives. And between disinformation and trying to steal health care from people, when they're already fearful for their health and their livelihoods, there is a crassness and a cruelty. That's why people are in the street. It is about civil rights. It's about humanity. It's about basic decency and the rule of law. And I have optimism in these very dark days that we will see brighter days ahead. And Mr. Barr will get his due, and hopefully the president will be roundly turned away this election cycle.
I'm going to come back to you, Congressman, in just a moment, but I want to go really quickly to our attorneys and ask each of you very quickly as a rapid fire. Is what we saw from William Barr when he was questioned by Kamala Harris perjury or contempt of Congress in your view? And I'll start with you, Barbara.
Well, we'd have to know the facts. It's very difficult to prove perjury. You have to prove that he then and there knew what he was saying was false. But I think with further investigation, the case could be made.
Joyce?
I agree with Barr. This turns on what conversations Barr had with people inside of the White House or perhaps with people at DOJ on this same timeline. If he in any way had the suggestion planted that he should open investigations, and we know that he did, by the way, in his early days as Attorney General, he began to revisit all of these key steps in the Mueller report investigations. So if there's evidence that he lied in response to Kamala Harris, he could open himself up to prosecution.
And Paul, Michael Cohen testified that Donald Trump just let you know what he wants. He doesn't have to explicitly tell you what to do. There's a mob vibe to the way that he communicates with people what he wants. And William Barr wrote a memo saying, buddy, I'm going to do what you want. I'm going to give you what you need. Whatever you need, just hire me. It doesn't seem to me that much of a stretch to say that the collusion is sort of on the table, that he was coming in to go after the president's enemies and to protect the president's friends from going to prison or to lighten their sentences or to give them a break. It's clear that's all that he thinks his job is. He doesn't do any other job. So the question is, could he then be held accountable for lying to the United States Congress, in this case, to Senator Kamala Harris?
You know, Trump has talked about how he wanted his own personal fixer. Trump used to be represented by Roy Cohn, and now Trump has his own mob lawyer in William Barr, who lies about everything. Barr lies about big things, like when he mischaracterized the Mueller report and when he claimed that the Obama administration was spying on the Trump campaign. And he lies about relatively small matters, like when he claimed that the U.S. Attorney Berman resigned when Berman then had to push back and say, no, you fired me. And so I don't think that we should believe anything this Attorney General says. And the Congress, including the Senate, has to take that seriously. Our Attorney General is undermining the rule of law.
Yeah, I mean, there's a word for that. It is corrupt, right? That there is a word for what he is displaying here. I want to come back to you, Congresswoman, because we had a breaking news story this morning that I want to get your reaction to. The New York Times is reporting that the Kremlin, that the government of Russia was paying bounties for the killing of U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and that some of those bounties may have been collected. We know 20 U.S. troops were killed in 2019 in Afghanistan, and some of them may have resulted in bounties being paid by Russia, by the Kremlin, to Taliban forces. Donald Trump knew about that. He knew about that at least in March, but probably earlier than March. He might have known about it while he was being impeached. He's done nothing about it. He has had communications with Vladimir Putin, at least we know on June 1st, to talk about bringing him back into the G7. We don't know that he's done anything about it, but the likelihood that he's done nothing. As a member of Congress, what do you make of this information?
I did read some of that breaking late last night and early this morning. It is chilling. It is sickening. It's shocking, but maybe it shouldn't be. This is how rotten to the core this president is. He doesn't seem to have any compassion or understanding. He doesn't seem to really love this country. He doesn't seem to really understand our Constitution. He certainly curries favor with our enemies and disrespects and disregards our allies and our friends. It is sickening. It is chilling that we ask people to serve, and they stand up so nobly to serve. And it's possible that Russia was doing something, putting bounties of our soldiers, and that this president would do nothing. But notice, with Attorney General Barr's help, he's done nothing about Russian interference in the 2016 election. It's just sickening.
Stays on brand. Well, maybe we should be not so surprised, because the president also sides with the part in the Civil War, the side of the Civil War that was killing Union U.S. troops. He sides with that side as well. So it is a strange, strange presidency. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, thank you so much for being